Hey, thank you guys for clicking on another video. How's our people out there? Are you guys enjoying this weather? We haven't had rain for like 4 days, and rain is not predicted for the next 10 days in the forecast. I think everything's about to dry up so I can get in and cultivate all these weeds out of my garden. Oh, I can't stand weeds, but sometimes they just get away from you. We got 2 Bigfoot stories. They are Bigfoot stories in this video, and I hope you guys love them. And I hope you're having a great weekend and a great week. Let me just shut up. Let's get rolling. How about that? All right, here we go. Here's a story from a woman who has done a lot of, I got a cramp in my leg. Hold on. Excuse me. Rarely happens, but I got a cramp in my leg. Here's a story from a woman who has done a lot of work in the Pacific Northwest in the redwood forests, Eureka, California. A little bit north of Eureka. Is that the Pacific Northwest? Maybe not. Maybe it's just Northern California. Anyway, here's what she writes. I've decided enough time has elapsed from where I had my experience that I doubt the Sasquatches are still there and hopefully not being bothered, and it's safe for me to share this story. My ex-husband and I lived and worked inside the Redwood State Parks north of Eureka, California for over 15 years, the last one being the Jedediah Smith State Park, just a few miles north of Crescent City on the coast. In the 4 years that we lived in this park from 1989 until 1994, we had 3 murders and 1 experience that I cannot wrap my head around to this day. While jogging one day, almost to Stout Grove, I instantly felt and heard an inner voice yell to me, "Run!" And I knew I was about to be tackled from behind. I felt a threat different than anything I have ever felt, and at that moment I ran faster than I've ever run in my life, waiting for either a mountain lion or something else to tackle me. When I made it to safety, to the middle of the bridge in the river, I stopped and I looked back to see what the innate threat was, and there was nothing there. But I knew it was there. I never went across to Stout Grove or on that trail again. In 1993, we moved to our own house right on the border of that same park. Soon after, a movie crew from Los Angeles was scouting the park since many movies are filmed there, and they reported seeing a Bigfoot cross in front of their RV on what is known as Walker Road. Right after that, I drugged my ex-husband, who still worked at the park at the time, and 2 kids up to the spot they said that they saw this thing. We looked and looked for footprints of any kind, and we didn't see anything. A bit further, and I noticed a huge pile of diarrhea at the base of a big redwood tree. I realized there was only one place this diarrhea machine could be, and that would be up, right above us in the tree. We got out of there very quickly. Black bears are common in the park and even at our house on a nightly basis. From my training in wilderness survival and tracking, I knew this huge pile of scat was not from a bear. I wish I had collected a sample of this scat and had it tested, but I felt that getting out of the area was more important at the time. Soon after this, and right down the road from Walker Road, I took my horse for a ride up a trail through the redwoods. When we were about 1.5 miles up, there was a tall wall of Asian blackberries. They grow everywhere there. We got even with the blackberry thicket, and my horse and I heard crunching leaves just beyond the thicket. I was sure it was a bear, and I prayed it would not burst through the brush and attack my horse. My horse began crow-hopping, and now I worried the horse would throw me, but it didn't, and we kept moving while this thing followed us for a long distance. I talked softly to my horse, trying to calm him, and he did really good. But that thing was very close the whole way, and concealed itself in the thick brush. Eventually, we made it off the mountain, and I have not been back. A few years later, we moved to Northwest Colorado. My 17-year-old son worked for the Rocky Mountain Youth Corps in Steamboat Springs, building trails and campsites. On this occasion, the group was camped in the Flat Top Wilderness Range, close to the town of Oak Creek. My son called me one day while they were there and described a terrible howling sound that he had heard the night before. I asked him to imitate the sound over the phone, and I immediately recognized it as Bigfoot. I had heard these same sounds while living in the Redwoods in the Hooper Reservation near Arcata, but I didn't tell him I thought it was Bigfoot, and over the phone I played the sounds from several animals, to which he said didn't sound at all like what he and the others had heard. I then played a recording of a Bigfoot yowl from Pennsylvania, and he immediately said that that was it. Now that I had confirmed the sound, I told him it was a Sasquatch and that they were camping in their territory. I even suggested he tell the crew leaders that it would be best if they moved out of the area. They moved their camp and they didn't return. Now I was intrigued. I knew where a Bigfoot was and I had to go check it out. So the next day, my husband, a friend of mine, and I headed that way and set up camp where my son's crew had camped just days before. I didn't wait around to help set up camp with my husband. My girlfriend and I took off looking for evidence. Finding a foot trail I knew they had probably used, I headed into the forest and soon walked up on a beaver pond. I was only 50 feet from our camp at this point. The grass and brush in the spot I was standing in was beaten flat to the ground. It was a bedding area for something big. Walking into the water's edge, I saw two enormous tracks where a Bigfoot had obviously knelt down or squatted to drink water from the pond. I snapped 2 pictures and then followed the path on up the hill. My friend was behind me and she tripped and had trouble getting up, and while I stooped down to help her, I saw more tracks in the wet soil. Again, I took more pictures and actually measured these. They were 10 inches wide and 19 inches long. By this time, my husband had joined us and we followed the trail a bit further to a large stand of aspens. It was the area from which my son said they heard the howls the night before. We stopped and visually surveyed the area, noting that all the brush and grass leading into the aspens was beaten down like a herd of elk had bedded down there. But there was no evidence of mule deer or elk anywhere. I could also see where plants had been pulled and eaten or bitten off in big bunches. I saw it as exactly how primates eat in some environments. My husband and my friend had had enough and headed back to camp, urging me to go with them, but I wanted to stay. I took a thorough look at the area and I took pictures of everything I thought were important. And then it occurred to me that if this was the bedding area, that meant that the animals were probably still in the area, and they were more than likely watching me right now. Feeling vulnerable and nervous, I decided to head back to camp. Later that night, in the dark, my friend and I decided to try to sneak up on the bed to get a look at a Bigfoot. We approached the bedding area from the lakeside. My dog was at my side too, and we felt no fear at this point. We were within a few yards of the bedding area when something screamed and broke the silence of the night. It was terrifying. My dog cowered under my feet as we stood in that spot in disbelief. In a minute, we turned back to camp. As soon as we turned to walk away, the howling stopped, but that fear of this thing attacking us on our way out lingered, and the walk or run back was not pleasant. On reflection, I believe it was satisfied that we were leaving. Here is where the encounter goes from real flesh and blood to almost mystical. We were sitting around our campfire later that night, listening to the night sounds and talking. We felt calm and the night was beautiful. I was still excited to be so close to what I knew was a Bigfoot, and as it was, we were still camped only about 200 feet from that bedding area. My dog, Leo, began to whimper and desperately wanted in the truck. This dog never leaves my side and has never once wanted in the vehicle. My husband walked to the truck and I snatched up my camera and I began taking exposures in the dark. I doubted I would get anything more than blank exposures, but I started snapping the shutter button anyway. By the time I snapped 3 pictures, I saw that Leo had calmed down, which made me happy. Soon we were in the tent and asleep. It was actually an uneventful night after that. The next day we went straight home, and later I uploaded the images I had taken while in the dark. The first image startled me. It was filled with round orbs surrounded by a misty background. I moved to the second image and the orbs were there, but they were fewer in number. In the third image, the orbs were gone and the image only showed a faint light from our fire on the trees. So there you go. That's all my Sasquatch encounters. They are 100% true, and I would be happy to take a polygraph if you ask me to. I hope you enjoy these stories, and I really hope you truly enjoy the reality of Sasquatch out there without intents to harm them. And she signs off. Man, that's a great story. I keep going back to the big pile of diarrhea in my head. And how would you get a sample of that? Like with a spoon? I don't know. You scrape some off in a baggie? I don't know. I'm just kidding, y'all. It just sounded gross, like picking up a pile of Sasquatch diarrhea. Woo! But this was a great story, and it's very intriguing because of these orbs thing. Now, she couldn't see them while she was standing there and snapping off pictures, but the camera caught them. Now, do y'all think that maybe was like reflections of light or something off the campfire? Or could they really be orbs? Man, that is so fascinating. I really appreciate you sending this story. It was wonderful. Thank you, ma'am. I'd like to tell you this woman's name. I'm not going to because she wants to be anonymous. But I'd love to tell you her name and give you her resume and tell you about all of her accomplishments that she's made in her life. But suffice it to say that she is a very successful woman. She's retired now. She's worked in lobbying formats. She's worked with members of Congress. She's worked with the major unions throughout the United States in the administrative level. You're going to find out what she did. Now, let me say this. A person's work credentials don't necessarily make a Bigfoot story any more credible than anyone else's. But let's be honest. The general public believes that most people who would tell a Bigfoot story are just goofy crackpots like me. Like me, goofy. I mean, I just love these stories, and it makes no sense, but I'm consumed with them. But the point is that these stories come from people from all walks of life. I mean, from white collar down to blue collar, from the most wealthy down to the homeless person have had encounters with cryptids and weird things in their life. And I read this woman's email, and I know she kind of listed her accomplishments, and it is very impressive. If she hears this, then I just wanted to tell her that I'm very proud of you for what you've done, and congratulations on a great career. Now, she has a Bigfoot story, and it's really great. It's really great. So let's jump into it. She writes, "Who are we to be so arrogant to think that the world is not full of many mysterious, unexplained things? In fact, I know it is. I have never encountered a Bigfoot, but my mother did. I was only a child when this happened, but I vividly remember it. I will recount this experience to the best of my memory." And she titles the story, "The Wood Booger That Almost Got My Mama." I was born and raised in a southern West Virginia coal camp in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. I may be prejudiced, but looking back on life, I realized that we grew up in a paradise. I desperately miss my West Virginia hills, the fresh air, the beauty of the mountains, and breathtaking vistas at every turn. When we were kids, before the electronic trappings of today, we entertained ourselves by just playing with each other, and those beautiful mountains were our playground. We regularly played Tarzan, swinging on the grapevines. We would head to the woods for a game of hide and seek or to role play the latest TV episode of Daniel Boone. We also knew the location of all the best berry patches, morel mushrooms, wild greens, roots, ginseng, apple trees, chinquapins, as well as many other of nature's bounty outside our door, and we visited them regularly. Everyone raised a garden in the rich mountain soil and had a few chickens. Looking back, we had culinary bounty right outside our back door. We were not wealthy in material things, being children of poor coal miners, but we were rich in so many other ways. No one in the coal camp had much more than the next, so we didn't realize we were considered poor. Life was good and we lived it to the fullest. Our father worked at the local coal mine and we shopped at the company store, which was one stone's throw from our house. We lived in the former superintendent's house on a hill overlooking the company store. The houses along our street were the best in the community, being the homes reserved for the mine managers. Because these homes were elevated on the hillside to overlook the miners' homes in the coal camp, our house butted up against the forest. Dense woods surrounded us from behind our home to the top of the mountain, and we explored them regularly. My story is not my own, but my mother's encounter with what I am now certain was a Bigfoot. My mom is long since passed away, but I can remember this event vividly. I'll try to recount it as best of my memory. This was around July of 1966, the year before the Patterson-Gimlin film of what became known as Bigfoot even surfaced. It all began on a warm summer day when my older brother, who was 15, my older sister, 11, and I was the youngest at 8, decided to walk around the strip mine road above our home to look for blackberry patches. The local coal company had discovered a seam of coal on the mountainside above our home and strip mined it a few years earlier, leaving an indelible scar on our beautiful mountain. The strip road left behind was an invitation to the coal camp kids for many activities and mischief. We knew if we found enough blackberries, Mom would treat us to one of her wonderful blackberry cobblers and maybe some blackberry jam for enjoying later in the winter months. So off we went with our baskets in hand to see if we could find enough blackberries along the hillsides of the old strip mine road. My father had recently been injured in a mining accident and had a full leg cast, just one of many injuries he sustained in a mountain bump in the mine. For those not familiar with coal mining terms, a mountain bump, or sometimes known as a pressure bump or rock outburst, occurs when a sudden release of pressure from the overburden of the mountain occurs. This most often happens when the mine is deep under the mountain with lots of overburden and a solid sandstone mine roof that does not fall as you retreat the mine. Any old miner will tell you that you want the roof to fall as you retreat the mine to relieve this pressure. When you don't get the roof to fall, mountain bumps sometimes occur, which are sudden, violent release of pressure in the weakest coal pillar. These occur most often in the western United States, but due to the huge mountains and deep mines in southern West Virginia, we often had mountain bumps too. The reason I know all about all this is because I worked as a coal miner with my dad, and I went on to become the very first female coal mine inspector in the United States. But that is a story in itself for another platform, so back to the Bigfoot story. Mom decided that she wanted Dad to drive her into town to shop and run some errands. She told Dad that he would have to drive her to the start of the strip road so she could find and retrieve us kids to go along with them. The strip road was too rough for our old 1960 Chevrolet Impala, and she would have to walk around the road until she found us and bring us back to the car so that we could all go to town. So Dad drove her as far as he could and waited by the car on his crutches until she retrieved us and came back to the car for our trip into town. My mother didn't know this, but we had walked to the end of the strip road and taken a path cut through the woods which led back down the mountainside to the road where we lived. We made a big loop around and headed back home with baskets full of luscious blackberries. Meanwhile, Mom traveled to the end of the road and noticed our footprints in the dust, which led to the footpath to home. She figured that we were probably back home by now. Being that there was no means of communication back to our dad on the other end of the strip road, she had no choice but to walk back the way she came to the car where Dad was waiting. Mom said that as she walked back down the road, she began to hear something really big moving through the woods on the mountainside below. She said it sounded really big, like an elephant working its way through the woods. She could tell that it was bipedal and kept in step with her as she walked. When she stopped, it would stop. When she sped up, it did the same. Curiosity finally overcame her fear, and she climbed up on the berm to get a good look at the hillside. A berm is a raised bank or mound of earth piled on the side of the strip mine road to serve as a guardrail to prevent trucks and equipment from running over the edge. There was heavy undergrowth and mountain laurel covering the mountainside, obscuring her view, and she couldn't see anything. She said to add to her terror, everything else in the woods was dead silent, which unnerved her even more. All she could hear was the mirroring of her footsteps. She climbed back up on the berm a few times more to try to get a look at what was following her, but she says she never saw it. By the time she got back to the car, she was in a run, yelling at our dad to start the car. She obviously wanted to know what was wrong, and she told him something really big was following her beneath on the hillside. She told him to get her home so she could make sure her babies were okay. When they got home, we were all there proudly displaying our bounty of blackberries on the kitchen table. Mom thanked the good Lord above for providing protection to us and bringing us all home safely. Our dad, who was a miner, a hunter, and a woodsman, simply stated that it had to have been a black bear. But Mom adamantly explained this was no bear. She never told us what she actually saw. From that day forward, she forbid us kids from playing in the woods ever again. I can still see her shaking that switch at us, daring us to let her catch any of us up in those woods. She said if the wood booger didn't get us, a timber rattler or a copperhead would, and for certain, that switch would be waiting on us when we got home. We never went back to play in the woods except when we had an adult with us. She never spoke of this day anymore or ever come clean about what she actually saw. Looking back, I'm certain that it was a Bigfoot following her. The numerous accounts of sightings that regularly occur in West Virginia and the Appalachian Mountains only confirm this for me. This event occurred over 50 years ago, but we never ever forgot the day that our mama was almost taken by a wood booger. I finally made it to my retirement years. I have time to do things that I want, including listening to your videos. Oh, well, thank you. I also got to attend the Bigfoot conference in Gatlinburg, Tennessee last July. I enjoyed listening to the experts make their presentations. However, I would have enjoyed it more if there had been a platform to let the attendees share their experiences. Many got up to the microphones to ask questions, and I could tell they were eager to share their encounters. But due to the time restraints, folks were not able to do so. Your videos are the average Joe's stories and encounters, and that's what makes them so enjoyable. You never know what you're going to get, including people from all walks of life and over the world. Keep up the good work and carry on. And there's a couple of more paragraphs that I'm just going to keep for myself. But she goes on to talk about some other friends of hers. After some friends bought her a Bigfoot T-shirt, and they she posted it on her social media, and it caused a few of her friends to start talking to her about Bigfoot and recounting some experiences they had. And she's asked them to write them down or get in touch with me in some way so that we could share these, but she's not sure if that's going to happen. But that's the end of her email. And she, I know it sounds crazy, but I love these stories that women send me because they write so good. Good grief. You girls are absolutely awesome with your writing. You really pay attention to it. But this was a great story, and I wonder, she seems to be sure, and it makes me almost sure, that it sounds like her mother actually saw whatever this was down below her whenever she would walk up on that berm. And I know it was scary, and there's no way to deny that it was scary, because before then, all the kids were free to just roam that mountain and go up on that strip mine road and play in the mountain. But after that, she wouldn't let her kids go back out there. So she saw something. She saw something that scared her so much that she wouldn't let her kids go up there anymore. But anyway, ma'am, this was a wonderful, wonderful story. And thank you so much for sending it. I really appreciate you. Okay, thanks once again for listening to the video this far. I really appreciate you all. And I hope you do have a great week. And we'll see you guys on the next video. Thank you.